In lesson M005, we're going to talk about unit setup and how to understand scale. And it's important to do scale because that's one of the benefits of 3D is being able to build something in an actual real size so that you can gauge how big it is compared to something else, or if something would fit it, parts would fit into each other, or if a room would be big enough for the furniture that you actually want to work with. So unit setup is fairly simple to do, and we'll be using mostly generic units in this course, for the exception of Project 3, which is an architectural project. So what we're going to do in this lesson, we're going to learn how to change the units of measurement in 3ds Max so that you can switch back and forth from generic to architectural. We're going to talk about how to use the units to determine a specific model dimension. And I'm going to list some reasons why the unit of measurement would need to be altered for generic units. So let's take a look at just the basic system right now, which is, like I said, majority of our projects can be done here. If you're just playing around having some fun in 3ds Max, generic units are fine. They really have no significant value in real life, but what I've noticed is basically a generic unit is an inch in real life. So if you keep that in mind, if I said 12, if I put 12 units in, that would be a foot. And that, some people are comfortable with working that way. I've created this box, and in a little while we're going to talk about creating geometry and how to set up the actual numbers and sizes. But for now, when you create an object, over to the side you're going to see its parameters, its length, width, and height. Or if it's a sphere, it's going to be a radius, and that number, we'll talk about that later on. But right now, when we select the object and we go to move it, we've got these odd numbers again. And again, I talked about doing 0, 0, 0, and that puts the origin of the box at the center of the grid. If I want to move this over to the side here, I went 140, so I'll go ahead and key in 150. I actually moved it 150 units. Well, in real life, that would be 150 inches. When we click the box and we hit the Modify tab, you'll see that this box is 99 by 111 and 66 high. So these units, again, are very generic. They're not going to help us much. For argument's sake, I'll make a length of 100, a width of 100, and a height of 100. So now I have a perfect box. All 6 sides are the same, 100 units. And we know that this is 150 units off from one side. So that'll help us to determine what's going on. Now, where does this really come into play? Well, let's say, for instance, you want to put another box on top of this one. And I'm going to go ahead and create another box. And I'm going to go ahead and do a 150, 150, 150. If I put this box at the origin, 0, 0, 0, we know the box is 150, but we're in the center, so that actually means that we're about 75 units off here, and then this one is sitting off here at 150 units. So mathematically, you could actually figure out, how would I align this box perfectly centered with the other one? Well, that's easy. We'll just do a 0, 0, 0. And now we have, in wireframe, one box sitting in the other. But if you'll notice, in the top view, an object pivot point is not the center of the box. So that is a little tricky. We're going to look at that in a future lesson. But in terms of scale, you can see that this object was 100 square units. This one's 150 square units. You can see that one is obviously bigger than the other, and that's how we're going to determine that. Now, let's talk about a realistic sense here. In Project 3, you're going to learn how to create a house or a room. And let's say we want to make this floor. Okay, this box is going to be a floor, and we're in the front view, but that's okay. Let's say we want to make this the size of a real room. Well, you would have to actually measure your room. particularly I talk about a 12 foot by 12 foot room. That's 144 inches by 144 inches. So I type in here 144, 144, and now that actually would be the scale of my room. As you can see, physically looking at these boxes, we probably didn't assume that they were the size of a room. We probably thought, oh, it didn't really matter what size it was. We couldn't tell. But now, when we have an object such as a room, and we have a floor, think about how small the furniture is going to be in this room. That's why we're going to use scale. Now, it can get kind of frustrating when you're working with scale to say, okay, measuring everything in inches. If you're doing something big like a room, it's easier to work with architectural units. So to do that, we're going to look over here where it says Customize Unit Setup. And when we select Unit Setup, you'll notice that by default we're sitting in these generic units. We can switch to metric or US standard, or we can even make our own custom scale. Under US standard, when I click that, I can select the precision. So 1/1 would be simply feet and inches. Or we could go 1/8 of an inch, or 1/16 of an inch, or even 1/100th of an inch. So depending on the accuracy that you need, we're probably looking at maybe a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch at the most in terms of that. So we can also go down to inches, or we can work with feet. I'll hit feet. Now you'll notice that when I have this object selected, that it's 4 foot 8 2/4 inches. Or 4 foot 8 2/4 inches in the width. Now that may be a little confusing because it's a little accurate. So always come back up to Customize Unit Setup, and we can change that back down to a 1:1. So now we're at 4 foot 8 inches, and that's very easy to work with. So I recommend using that for your architectural project. But for your logo and robot, we're going to disregard scale. Just because it's not going to be as important as it is for your architectural project. So in this lesson, we just covered the basic unit setup and a little bit on understanding scale and the importance of having objects properly designed. In a very future lesson, maybe a couple weeks down the road, we're going to look at using 3D lighting in our scenes, which is going to be very dependent on accurate scale of your scenes.